publishing service that you are giving to the city of Salt Lake. Just logistics things, my expectations, I have to confirm that the core commissioners have determined to continue to meet electronically because meeting at a physical location presents a substantial risk to the health and safety of those who may be present at that anchor location. Also, just want to say that at our last full commission meeting, we lost our quorum probably halfway through and didn't get to complete the policies and practices recommendations for your acceptance or not. And so we got through 2 of them officially with approval and didn't get to the second 2. So we'll go through those this evening. But I would just encourage you, we've got several things that might need full commission discussion and or approval on. So we'll just ask that if you are going to leave early, let us know now so we can maybe adjust things to the front of the meeting if necessary. So please shoot a chat or something like that so that we know we might need to adjust if you're going to have to leave. 11 is a quorum, so if we go below 11, we can't conduct business. We can conduct business, we cannot make any formal recommendations. Thank you, Commissioner Ahmad.
I will need to leave. This is Rand. I'll need to leave a little early.
Okay. How many do we have, Cindy Lou, on the right now as a quorum?
I believe you're close to 13. Sorry, I will give you a count in just a moment. But okay. You need 11, like you said. I'll give you a count in a moment.
Yeah, so 3 folks just notified us that they have to leave a little early. So we'll make sure that, is anybody have to leave before, let's see, before 5:30?
No.
Okay. Can anybody not be able to be here till 6? I'm just trying to see where we go.
What time the game start?
I'm not sure.
7:30.
Yeah, I'll be right after 5:30.
Okay.
A little after 5:30.
Thanks, sir.
I have to leave at about. I need to leave probably at 10 till 6.
Okay. Well, let me stop talking and asking questions and just get rolling on the agenda and see where we get. So just first up is a listening session report, the listening session that we had. Larry's going to offer his thoughts and maybe some debrief on how well the listening session was attended and just some thoughts on that. Larry?
Thanks, Dante. Making sure my audio is coming through okay. Commissioners, good evening. Thanks for your robust participation in the listening session that we held on Wednesday, the 19th. Do I have that right? Yes. I'm just going to walk you through some tabular and graphical representations of our results from the listening session, and this will be provided to you. I think it may already be posted online as part of the agenda. This first graph shows you a breakdown of the zip codes from which participants joined us. These are folks who were connected by phone to the meeting. You'll see that these numbers on the left are actually raw numbers as opposed to percentages. So we had roughly 275 people who joined via phone, with another 25 or so who were texting. So right around 300 people participated during the course of the evening. And this represents the breakdown by zip code. I apologize that I didn't have a chance to put this into a map form, but I'm guessing that a lot of folks are familiar with Salt Lake City zip codes.
Hey, Larry, real quick, we talked about that on our subcommittee call, and I believe a couple of them. No, 84116, I believe. Is that the Rose Park area? What, does anybody know? Yes.
That's correct.
Yes.
All right, and then 84115 is where?
Liberty Wells.
Liberty Wells. All right.
Thanks very much for that. I apologize again for not putting that in the graph. This shows the breakdown of participants by race and ethnicity, and I'll point out that this was based on folks, self-reporting, and also it does not reflect all 300 participants, but a portion of them who answered the question relative to race and ethnicity. But these bars on the graph are reflective of percentages, as you can see from the bottom bar. I know that there's some, there may be some consternation that the percentages for communities of color are low. But I will tell you that I think that both in May and in January at our 2 sessions, the folks who actually were able to share their comments during the session were certainly coming from communities of color as well as from the white population. But I think that it's both an important thing to flag as you parse these results, but also do know that some of the qualitative data is very much coming from the communities of color that the commission is meant to focus on. This was the multiple choice question that we started with in terms of where the audience's energy primarily was. And as you can see, there were, pretty similar levels of interest in policies and practices and training. I'll note that school safety actually got quite a bit of commentary as well. So even though not as many folks picked that as their priority, there did seem to be a good bit of interest in that. And then we allowed for people to submit open-ended responses in terms of what the other might be. And a number of folks mentioned mental health. They also talked about cultural changes. So these are all verbatim answers. There's no editing in these responses. We then had a presentation from the training subcommittee and asked people for their kind of initial reactions to what they were hearing. You'll note that roughly half or so of the respondents were in the very good or good camp, with a number of others who were neutral or unsure. And I wanted to mention, we had a comment from a listener, from a viewer, who said, this is a lot of information, coming at us really, really quickly. And it's hard. It was hard for this listener to kind of fully parse it, and we get that. We felt that it was critically important just to make sure that the community was being given a thorough accounting of what the commission had been doing and what their recommendations were sizing up to be, and that we could provide additional level of detail on the website or through other means. So the numbers under neutral or unsure, I think, are partly just based on folks having a hard time digesting all of the information in a relatively short period of time. But these are the comments that were made in addition to the responses in multiple choice. There was also a call to this effect that I'll get into here in a little bit. But you see the support for the idea of trainers coming from the community, folks wanting to know how the training will specifically promote racial equity. And so that might be something we want to just underscore in the report. And then there's also mention of training for mental health specialists, including citizens' opinion, and point-in-time trainings, as well as training to do their job without firearms. Again, this is just verbatim what folks submitted. Here on policies and procedures, I'm moving quickly just in the interest of all the other items for tonight, but again, I can follow up on any of this later on. This is for policies and procedures. As you can see, kind of a spread here of feedback, but a majority of it was I think positive. And this is other information that folks are interested in knowing or commenting on as it relates to policies and practices. You'll see a couple of comments related to 911, desire to make sure that racial profiling, particularly of drivers, was put to a halt, bias assessment, and how police infractions or infractions for things like traffic stops perhaps could be taken out of police purview. And then lastly, the school safety subcommittee, as I mentioned, there was certainly one caller who talked at some length about her feelings related to the presence of SROs. And these comments, are, I think, similar in line in terms of folks' feelings about whether school resource officers should be in the schools. I thought this comment was interesting. The issue is less the officers, but that the school administration is using them improperly and calling on them to do things that they shouldn't. So I think that, in large part, my analysis of the comments and the feedback is that the community seems very supportive of some of the biggest areas of focus that the commission has taken, and that if anything, this commission could benefit from making sure that their report reflects some of these particular issues that were raised so that the community knows that they were heard. I'm not going to go through this last bit in detail, but this is a full transcription of the callers who spoke live during the meeting. This first caller was talking about training for dealing with mental health circumstances. The second caller was as well, and then additional commentary on the SROs. So again, this will be transmitted to you. And I apologize, I didn't have a chance to incorporate the Facebook comments yet. I know there were some that Cindy Lou and the staff were tracking, and I can amend this report to include those comments. So the focus here was just to make sure we got something to you as quickly as possible, rather than waiting until we could put a whole narrative together. Overall, I think the community appreciated the opportunity to hear what you all were up to and give their feedback. There also has been some feedback online that I'll be able to share with you over email at a later time. Happy to take any questions, but again, thanks for everybody's participation.
Thank you, Larry.
You bet.
Thoughts, questions for Larry?
Thank you, Larry.
Of course.
And I'm sorry, Larry, maybe I was, the report will be available to commissioners? How?
Yes, I think if nothing else, I'll just make sure that it gets distributed via Coletta and Jesse by email, if nothing else, but we can probably get it also posted onto the city website if I can get with the staff after the meeting.
Great, thank you, sir.
Sure.
Hey, Larry.
Yes, Commissioner
Will we be
Hawkins.
having will we be having a quorum where the citizens will be able to ask us questions? Like, not listening, but they ask us questions. I received some calls from people and they were upset because they were not able to express their concerns. So
They weren't able to express them during the course of the May session?
yeah.
Yeah, just for everybody's awareness, we took all of the calls that were shared with me, that were put into the queue. We took those folks on air. I know there were only 3, but those are all of the callers that I was told were on the line wanting to speak. If there were folks who felt they couldn't get on, I'll be sure to check with our screeners, but I don't have any awareness of that, but I certainly apologize to anyone who had hoped to have their voice heard that couldn't. That wasn't something I picked up on as I was hosting, but of course there could have been, a glitch in the system.
Right.
As it relates to a desire to ask you all questions, my initial thought there would be to provide them with the resources that we have sort of maintained throughout the course of this process, the call-in, the text, and the web resource, only because of the timing. It obviously takes a tremendous amount of coordination to do one of these listening sessions live. We are doing some small group sessions here during June, but I think it might be difficult for us to do that and sort of meet expectations on the completion of the commission's report and kind of the June 30 timing. So my thought is, I'm happy to follow up with you after the meeting, but my thought is to provide them with the call-in number, the text, and the website, and see if they can get their questions conveyed those ways, and then we can make sure to loop back and get them answered as needed.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Of course.
Thank you. Any other questions for Larry? All right. Moving along, I want to acknowledge that Mr. Wynn is here. He's been patient with us as they've been trying to move through the resolution declaring racism as a public health crisis. And so just want to see, Mr. Wynn, if you're prepared to offer that one more time, and we have a quorum that could do what you might need to have done approving that. So I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Evening or good afternoon, commissioners. Thank you for having me here to be able to share again, my appreciation and in allowing us to have this declaration be reviewed by your group and having the feedback. I know we had some great feedback from some of the commissioners that are part of this group, and we took those into account. And we would love to be able to have your support in being able to declare racism as a public health crisis. And I do have a member of my team here as well. I wish other members of my team was here because they are fantastic. And Syriac was able to make it. And I'll let Syriac introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Syriac Alvarez Valle. I'm a policy analyst at Voices for Utah Children and appreciate the work you all are doing in this commission and your support on this declaration.
Thank you. Welcome. So do you have a document that you want to share, or I don't remember where we finished up. I believe it was shared last time. We just didn't have a quorum to do a full recommendation by the commission. So how would you like to proceed, Mr. Wynn?
That is correct. The document that was shared last time is pretty much the same document that you all had that is available now. And we would love to be able to get your support on it. The Human Rights Commission offered their endorsement last night, and we would love to have your endorsement as we work on having this declaration be declared.
Great, thank you, sir. Any questions for Mr. Wynn on the resolution? And if I'm correct, the resolution has been shared and basically waiting by the mayor and her staff for the commission's approval, but she's good with how it is at this point. Is that correct?
I believe so. And I don't know if Weston's here. Weston would be able to speak more upon that.
Yeah.
Thanks, Dante. Hey, commissioners. Yes, the mayor has looked over it, staff has looked over it, and we are good with it.
Great, thank you. So then I'll just, are there any, if there's no questions, then we'll just put it to the commissioners for a consensus decision on whether to approve.
I'm told Reverend Davis.
Yes, sir.
Reverend Davis, Dante, and I would suggest that we support the resolution.
Thank you, sir.
I'd like to second that. This is Ephraim.
Okay, great. We're not going to do a roll call vote unless we need to. Let's just see, is there anyone who is opposed to accepting the resolution as presented? All right, seeing no opposition, I would suggest we have a consensus, if not unanimity. So, Mr. Wynn, I would suggest you have the commissioner's full approval in moving that resolution forward.
Thank you so much, commissioners. I really sincerely appreciate your support and your efforts in advancing equity in the areas of policing, but also supporting equity and declaring racism in the world of public health. And as a public health professional and as a community member, I certainly appreciate this. And I know if our community members were here and the rest of my group was here who worked on this declaration, they would express similar, if not more appreciation than I have. And if I could, I can give you all a hug, but can't do that. But thank you so much for giving me and my team the opportunity to be able to present this to you all and for taking the time to support this effort. Thank you.
Can I just say that sometimes the way we vote comes across as somewhat anticlimactic. This is overwhelming support, even though it's in silence. So I just want to acknowledge the level of support from this commission, even though it's all done Franklin style in silence.
Yeah, it's a huge statement, no question. So thank you for following up with us so that we could support you in your work.
Congrats, Kevin and Syriac.
Thank you so much, everyone. I can feel the energy through the screen.
Excellent.
Congrats.
And just as maybe a follow-up to that, and thank you, Cindy Lou, for bringing it back to the forefront of my mind. I think we would be remiss if we did not at least acknowledge, since we're talking about racism as a public health crisis, acknowledge what was just learned in Canada this past week about the death of so many Indigenous children in their residential schools, the boarding schools that they have. It's just atrocious, and I would suggest not an isolated incident, as I'm sure all of you know, but it's just an example of how institutional and systemic racism is so egregious and has decimated so many communities that things are still coming to light. So I don't think there's any question about racism being a public health crisis and the devastation that it causes to communities. So I'll just pause if anybody wanted to make any comments about that.
I agree.
I'm going to have to speak on that. Thank you, Dante, for bringing that awareness out. I want to reiterate my conversation I've had a number of times, and forgive me if I can't remember the officer who made a comment about not knowing why Indigenous people are hesitant or afraid when being confronted by police or law enforcement. If anyone has the time, I really would like to suggest that educate yourself about this finding of 215 First Nation children as early as 3 years old, being rounded up by law enforcement and taken away to an area you will never see your parents. This is what I'm talking about when it comes to law enforcement and the issues of that support system that needs to be put in place. But I can only say it, and I can go on and say, but it will take that initiative from you all to educate as well. And so anyways, I just wanted to reiterate that. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you.
I just want to say that I support the commission passing the resolution. I think it should be noted that the resolution declaring racism as a public health crisis did not pass the legislature. They couldn't get it passed. There may be some pushback on this from a legislative point of view. So I know that we're not part of the legislature, that we're doing our thing here, but just be aware that there's a current political climate that is pushing back against diversity, equity, training, and even anything of discussing racism that is being painted with this broad brush related to critical race theory. And that could be looped into this. This could end up being seen through that lens. So I just want people to be aware that this is happening in the broader political atmosphere, that the temperature is really high right now when it comes to talking about diversity issues, especially even how we discuss racism, that we may get some opposition to the resolution as a result of it.
No, great point. And I can tell you from personal experience, We do a lot of work with school districts here in Colorado, as well as the Department of Education. And a couple of our clients, one who we provided training for and we're working with on equity and infusing that within their classrooms, the school board fired her for her desire to continue to do this work. Another one of the larger school districts in Colorado, we did a keynote presentation on Professional Development Day for over 900 of the teaching staff and received evaluations that went to the district of 97% approval, desire for more. There was a school board meeting 2 weeks later where there was a handful of, and I really mean a handful of white parents who were accusing us and the school district by extension of calling their children racist, of calling their children the oppressors, of creating a racist environment in their classrooms, that we are Marxists for having this conversation and misrepresenting what critical race theory is completely. And the school board bought it and canceled our contract. And so it's, well, it's coming to a legislator near you, that I will tell you, because it's just become a wedge issue in education for those on the right.
Yeah, I fear that it's being used as a way to cancel diversity, equity training. Because as we all know, as a result of, after the summer of protest, especially around the murders of Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, there was a push to really understand what was going on, what was happening. Well, the backlash to that is what we are seeing right now, being under the umbrella of what critical race theory is defined as, but not is. So just be aware that this may happen. Most likely it will happen because that's just the political climate right now.
And Commissioner McDonald, you said the political climate, and Dante, you said the school board bought it. We have to remember also how much money plays a role in all of this. The school board bought it because they know where they're getting their money from. The politicians are buying it because they know where they're getting their money from. And that fear of what their child may know and turn against them, which is how do we even get past this besides, here we go with another fight?
And the school board nor senior leadership in the districts are educated enough to be able to respond about their understanding of what CRT is, as opposed to what someone is telling them it is. And that's the total disconnect. There's no way they could respond to what they were hearing, so they just said, well, we can't teach that, therefore we agree.
So seriously, there's no way that they can respond, Dante? I mean, if they're educated enough to know.
No. I know you addressed that to Dante, and I don't want to take up too much of our time with this because I've been doing interview after interview after interview after interview, and I just came back from another interview on this. And it's, the educators have bought, the legislators, especially if you are in a red state such as Utah, okay, have bought hook, line, and sinker the stories that are coming from the far right that are speaking to this issue very loudly, and they don't understand it. They don't want to understand it. And they just passed resolution, as what happened here in Utah, to ban something they didn't understand, and have come out and said they did not understand it. And even if you speak to them right now, they will still give you an incorrect definition of what CRT is, even after explaining, this is what it is, but they can't even move to the center of that because the far right have grabbed them by the neck and said, this is what it is, it's related. They're trying to teach our kids Marxism, as Dante said, and you can't, or the blame and the shame. You're trying to blame our children for the sins of their forefathers, basically, and shame them for being white. That's what's happening. So anything that is under the lens of teaching racism or just has the word racism in it and understanding racism, it is being brushed under this broad brush of critical race theory, and we have to shut it down. That's what's happening. We who believe in diversity training. Now keep in mind, and I want to make sure I get this right. I need to make this very clear. Diversity equity training has absolutely nothing to do with CRT.
Right.
Absolutely nothing to do with CRT. But that is the way it is being framed. So if you speak to this issue, you have to give a disclaimer at the very top that I'm going to say this, even though I know I'm saying this wrong, to address this issue that they're talking about, which is wrong. That is not what CRT is, but I need to address it from that lens. That's what you have to do. So you're going to have, I support this resolution 100%, as I said, but this is, expect what's going to happen and what's going to be said as a result of it in this political climate.
Thank you, Commissioner.
I have a question. I know we're getting a lot of this from parents. Is anybody talking to students, although they don't really have a whole lot of rights as high school students, but is anybody talking to students? Because we are in a generation now where we have children coming from around the world who want to get to know their peers. I'm wondering if the students are saying anything, if they have started their own little clubs or anything. I'm just curious if there's any numbers out there, if there are any numbers.
Well, you saw what happened at our press conference, right? So at our press conference, the white parents brought their little kids with the anti-CRT sign. So they're being indoctrinated into something that is incorrect and shutting something down that they have no understanding about based on what they're being taught by their parents. They don't know. They're little kids. They were literally little kids. I mean, they were little kids having signs that based on what their parents had told them. When you say talk to the students, this is not even in the high schools. This is in college.
That's
so
what
it's not even appropriate really to talk to the students because it doesn't impact them. What does impact them is getting an accurate portrayal of history. That's what will impact them. So if we take away diversity training, cultural sensitivity, equity, learning about equity, equality, if you take all of that away, then yes, that will impact them. But as it relates to CRT, this is not them. This is on a university level based on whatever that scholar decides he wants to study and collect data for. That's what it is. And I interrupted you, Dante.
No, you're fine. I could do this all day because I do it all day. But what I'd like to do is maybe put this on the end of the conversation so that we can get to, before we lose a quorum, get to the business of the commission specifically. So if it's okay with the commissioners, I'd like to move to the presentation of the policies and practices subcommittee so that we can ensure that we get those approved as necessary. So I appreciate you, and we'll pick it back up because I could do it all day. So Josh.
Well, I'm going to let Commissioner McDonald continue to talk about the recommendations from our subcommittee. So she's still on. Okay, let me share my screen. I'll pull these up. Then I know Siobhan has some as well. So I'm going to try and get through them quickly and then just leave it for any comments or questions. All right, am I sharing my screen?
Yes.
All right. So just to pick up from last full commission meeting, we had 5 recommendations. Recommendation 2 and 1 were passed. 3 was, but we didn't have a vote or a quorum. Last subcommittee meeting, we had a great dialogue with the subcommittee and the chief and Mr. Cottrell, and have some recommendations that came from the subcommittee. So I'll hit those first. So this one is related to the body worn camera ordinance. I highlighted here just a tweak that we'd like to put to the full commission for a vote. Some of this is to make this recommendation a little more durable, sustainable, and lean. Salt Lake City PD is required by ordinance and policy to do reporting on the body worn cameras quarterly, annually, and biannually. There are 3 different requirements. So we tried to combine some of that and capture that here in the reporting. First, related to Ordinance 54, there was some discussion about this qualified individual outside of SLCPD being designated by the mayor. And there's discussion, what happens when there's a turnover of the mayor? Where's the equity lens on this? And so one addition to this recommendation is this in yellow. Furthermore, the mayor's designation of this qualified individual shall require approval and support from the city's chief equity officer. So we wanted to put an equity lens on that and ensure that that designation has that equity lens on it. Second, pursuant to current policy standards and ordinances, multiple body worn camera reviews and audits are required, including those by the SLCPD audit and inspection unit, the internal audit, the qualified individual designated by the mayor that I just referenced, and then the Commission on Accreditation for Law Enforcement Agencies. The department's required annually to report, correct, Chief? And so they're those 3. So in order to further the efficiency and transparency and accountability, this recommendation stays the same, that the city specify, develop, and establish criteria regarding how body-worn camera reviews and audits are to be conducted, and define uniform and consistent performance metrics and language. And again, that should be done collaboratively with the internal audit and inspection unit and that designated qualified outside auditor. These recommendations remain the same. And then just to clarify on what we talked about earlier, the reporting out of this, Ordinance 54 requires a record and report will be provided to the mayor and the city council on a quarterly basis. Therefore, we added the commission recommends that the SLCPD audit and inspection unit also provide a record and report on the department's internal audit to the mayor and city council on a quarterly basis. So again, Ordinance 54 refers to that outside designated individual reporting quarterly. We recommended the internal audit unit reports quarterly also. The commission recommends these quarterly reports be provided to the commission at the same time. SLCPD should inform the commission of any incidents reported to internal affairs. Pursuant to Ordinance 54, any findings of material non-compliance, and again, this is in Ordinance 54, that any findings will be referred to the chief of police, the city attorney, the council chair, and the mayor's chief of staff. We added as a recommendation that these findings also be reported to the commission. And finally, on this one, SLCPD is required to provide an annual report to CALEA, and such report should also be shared with the commission. Anything to add to that, Chief or subcommittee members?
No, Josh, I think you've captured our conversations very well. So thank you.
And thank you, Chief, and the subcommittee members, to clarify a little bit and try and make this a little more sustainable. So Dante, unless there are any questions from the full commission, I'll leave the vote to you.
I have a question. After the reports are provided, is there any recommendation about what should be done with?
Yeah, I would, my thought is, yeah, that's the intent. You'll have, just like this process with subcommittees and this commission, you've only been able to make decisions when you're informed, right? Informed decisions are more sustainable. So the intent here is to be for the commission to be informed, to understand, and I would expect then, yeah, probably some type of dialogue would ensue and recommendations potentially would develop and ensue. This is a beginning step.
Yeah, Josh, just real quick, Commissioner Davis, as always, we're always open to the suggestions and the dialogue and anything that you would, anything that you would provide to us that we could do better. I mean, the department could do better to report, and then to be open and transparent with our community. So I would always be open to that conversation as we report out on those issues, on those different audits.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Davis. Any other questions on this recommendation?
Josh?
Yes.
Who is the boss of the chief executive officer?
Are you asking Mr. Cottrell?
Whoever can answer that.
Hi, Commissioner Prospero. I'll take a stab at your question. I think, are you asking who, where the chief equity officer for the city, where they're housed in the city?
Yes.
I believe it would be the mayor's office. The mayor would be the boss of the chief equity officer.
So the chief equity officer needs to get, no. The chief equity officer's boss has to get the chief equity officer's approval on designating a qualified individual.
Yeah, and that might be a little strong language there, I think, is what you're getting at, Moises. And so definitely we can reword that, because that does drive home a point that I think you're making, right?
Yeah, I'm just wondering if I was the chief equity officer, I don't know if I'd want to go against my boss. But maybe I'm being too pragmatic. And Mark, is all this sound legally sound?
Well, I will give you the response that every attorney gives, that's sort of a chicken response, and that is, it all depends, of course. The devil will be in the details, but as sort of sketched out here, I think that what you're seeing here as an outline of it meets legal requirements.
Okay, yeah, I was just wondering about the sharing to all the parties, if that's legit. I mean, I'm fine with it. I'm surprised that it would be not against some policy or some law or something like that. Okay,
well,
that sounds good.
And to answer your question, Commissioner Prospero, Ordinance 54 requires that sharing of certain material non-compliance and how it's shared. And certainly if it's going to be shared outside of a city entity, like with the commission, there would probably be some constraints on ensuring that what can be shared is something that could be made public. So again, it all depend on sort of the specific language that could be used.
That was mostly my biggest concern, if it could be provided to the commission. So it can be, but with restrictions, possibly.
Yeah, and sort of, let me just sort of expand on that, because I'm sure that statement probably caused some questions to be asked. The way I look at it and think about it, and I don't know if this is what the commission has been contemplating, but when we think about instances where somebody might not be in material compliance with the city ordinance and a departmental policy that certainly might subject someone to disciplinary procedures. Generally speaking, when you talk about governmental employees and discipline, those matters that are currently under review and under investigation are not yet final. And municipalities, and Salt Lake City has treated those records as not public. When discipline has been imposed and the time for appeal has run, then those matters are considered public under state code, under the state, under GRAMA, the Government Records Access Management Act. So that's sort of what I'm contemplating as far as how information can be shared. Now, could you perhaps redact certain information that might, if somebody has a privacy interest in something that might be pending, but you wanted to get a sense of sort of what is in process, I believe you could probably provide statistical information and strip out that element of it that might where someone might have a privacy interest, so that you could at least get a snapshot of sort of what's happening. But that's sort of what I'm thinking when I talk about sort of the public records and sharing outside of the city entity.
Great, thank you.
One quick question for me, just I guess playing lawyer and semantics. It says that the designated by the mayor to randomly review and audit, who selects? Does this individual also select, or does SLCPD select and give to this individual to review and audit?
Yeah, do you want to cover that, Mark? Is that specified in the ordinance?
You'll have to apologize. I apologize. I don't. Could you direct me to that specific language again, Dante?
Yeah, it's in the first bullet point, second half of the phrasing, or the first sentence.
I mean, the way it's been contemplated, I believe, is that that auditor would have the ability to select and choose those videos on a random basis, and it wouldn't be spoon-fed, right? You want to create a situation where there's some independence there. Certainly, if you need to add language in there, I imagine you could probably do so. Does that answer your? I hope that was me understanding your question and trying to answer it.
Yeah, no, it does. For me, the word select is missing in that. They can review, but they may not be able to select what they review. That's my point.
Yeah, so this might address that, Dante, or be an area where we could capture that intent, but the sub-recommendation was to increase the random reviews of video by the outside qualified individual from 5 to 20.
Yes.
Right? Per month. Include random sampling of officer videos as well as completed supervisor reviews.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I get that. I don't know that answers my question. So maybe I'm reading too much or not enough into the way it'll actually function. But that's just my question.
Well, the reality is, if it's random sampling, it doesn't matter if it be the mayor or if it be the chief of police or if it be that weird guy Steve Angiweird, and if it's random sampling, it should be the same, right?
Well, but you can focus on one particular area of policing and not another, I guess is my point, versus a more broad view of varieties of departments and divisions and the work that gets done. That's all I'm suggesting.
Yeah, is there value interest from the commission to add language or specify that ability to what you're saying, Dante, select?
Yeah, that's the only thing I'm suggesting is select, review, and audit. Just to be very clear about who gets to select those cameras.
I agree with Dante.
Right.
Can I ask, Chief, you already have in one of your many requirements to make reports, random review of officers. Is there a system that selects that random officers, and would that be something that could be used to select random videos across the board?
I'm sorry, Commissioner Warden. the first part of your statement was cut off a little bit. Say that again.
Man, I just got this new microphone so everybody could hear me and I still can't communicate. I believe you already have some responsibilities in terms of reviewing random officers, a selection of their videos, right? Do we use that system or something similar to select random videos, random body cam videos across the board so it would not be isolated, which is part of Dante's concern?
Yeah, and I'd have to double check with Sergeant Mason Gibbons, but I think everybody's name is drawn randomly. And then 2 of those videos are to be reviewed in that time period from each officer. So
there's no randomness across divisions. It's just random across the entire department.
yeah, everybody, all 570 officers are going to have their videos reviewed. And those names come up random. Even myself, my name came up in January and I didn't have any videos to review, but my supervisor would have to review them if I had them within the time period selected. So the randomization of the officers is connected to their videos. So everybody's name's coming up and everybody's going to be, their videos will be looked at.
Yeah. So I'm thinking too much, but I guess so theoretically, all 20 could come from traffic.
Well, are you talking within the internal audit, Dante? Or are you talking within the audit, the matrix audit, or the recommendation of the 20 videos?
Yes, the recommendation of the 20. So if you're drawing those without parsing them by work area, theoretically, they could all come from one division.
Right, and well, yes, theoretically, yes. But we don't really want to have our thumb on the scale of how that works. We want that independent review so they can select whatever ones they want and review them independent of anything we do. So that would have to be worked out in the details, just like Mark's talking about, as to how they randomize that and select those. They could like you're talking, Dante, they could maybe say within different divisions, we have so many from each of these divisions so that we don't just encapsulate one, like you're saying, traffic or this patrol unit. We could maybe spread the wealth across the board.
Yeah, and that's what I'm thinking. Mark?
If I might add, I actually spoke briefly with Sergeant Gibbons about a process and what that might look like last week. And if it'd be helpful, I'd be happy to share that with the commission, sort of what he'd envisioned to maintain that independence. Hearing no objection, I'd be happy to share briefly. Something he'd envisioned was generating a list of all of the cases that Salt Lake City Police Department had generated over the course of a month. So over the month of May, you had around 4,300 cases. And you could have somebody in records create a spreadsheet with each case representing a line, a row in a spreadsheet. And then you give it to that outside auditor. And then that outside auditor could use a random number generator if they wanted to pick a number in that range and choose rows at random and document that process. And if you pull up that case number, then you go into evidence.com where these body cam videos are kept and pull up the body cam videos from that case number. Now, if you're just doing it by video, you might need to do another random number generator to determine which body cam video you would view. But so long as you're documenting your process through it, you essentially give the control over to the outside auditor. So that was one way they had envisioned an independent, random audit of the body cam videos.
Yeah, and Mark, to your point, then where the subcommittee has been with working with Sergeant Gibbons and Chief Brown and the evolution of this, that is where this language came from, just to recommend that in concert, these criteria are developed. And as Mark, you said, and I heard you say that Sergeant Gibbons has been thinking this through and shared that with you recently, right? So our subcommittee's intent is that we can't get this perfect, we can't fix everything, but based on everything we've learned about body-worn cameras policies, practices in SLCPD and ordinance 4554. These are the recommendations we make right now to take the next step.
Josh, Chief, yeah.
And commissioners, yeah, if I could just weigh in, that's why I think it's important, and I'm very willing to meet quarterly because this is a good start. We'll fine tune this process as we move along, and we're open to suggestions. So just like Commissioner Davis said, if we have recommendations or suggestions, we can tweak this as we go. And you have my commitment that we'll always listen and do the things that would be best for the department and the community, just like we all want.
And to that point, Chief Brown, our first version, we had an annual reporting, and then we went to biannual, and Chief said, we'll make it available quarterly, and do it quarterly and be as transparent and have engagement and report to the commission so that space can be created to have continual improvement.
Thank you both. Commissioners, thoughts, questions for the Policies and Practices Subcommittee's recommendation? Okay, seeing no questions, is there anyone in opposition to the acceptance of the recommendations as submitted? Okay, so I believe we then have consensus on the acceptance of these, Josh. So,
all right, good job. All right. Okay, this was a dual recommendation from the training subcommittee as well. And just again, further research, Chief Brown did some research, talked with some other departments, Utah Highway Patrol, others, ran some numbers. The primary recommendation here is that the commission recommends the funding, development, and delivery of community-based training on the history of policing of people of color. This remains the same. What was added to this was this recommendation or outline that the commission and the PD estimate the following scope and costs, and then recommends that this training be funded and developed as soon as reasonably possible, and all officers complete the training within a reasonable time. Additionally, it is recommended that council provide any necessary additional funding for voluntary overtime pay to ensure regular staffing needs can still be met while officers take time to attend the training within this timeline. And so again, the subcommittee and the chief wants this training to be developed and implemented as soon as reasonably possible, and that the funding is there to do so, and any barriers that might get in the way be taken away. So there it is. Any comments, questions, follow-up?
Just a comment. I don't know who you're going to get to do 28 sessions at 2 hours apiece for $10,000.
Not you, it sounds like.
No.
This was based off of the Utah Highway Patrol's contract and who they're working with. Right, Chief?
Well, you better find them, because that's a hell of a deal.
We were just going with the numbers that were provided by Commissioner Anderson when we inquired. Dante, it may be just like you're thinking.
If you recall our last full commission meeting, the threshold to direct select, I believe, is $40,000 and under. But I mean, we don't even need to put a number, a figure on this,
right?
Right. It's just to provide the funding. It's not up to the commission subcommittee to price quote.
Right, I was just making a statement, but you're right, you're right.
We're all not million-dollar consultants.
Yeah, right. Okay. Questions for the subcommittee on this particular recommendation?
Hey, Dante, feel free to- I mean, this, you're training, you're the training guy. So yeah, if we want to,
I mean, even if you, yeah, I mean, even if you got somebody to do it, well, I just don't think that's enough. But I mean, I agree with the way it's written and the expectation of hours and time. Yes, I think there's a question about the dollars, but yeah.
To that point, I pose a question. This is Ephraim.
Sure.
These numbers, are they like set in stone? Well, is that the determination of the council, or?
You mean the dollars or the total number?
The dollars.
I think this is just, correct me if I'm wrong, Josh or Chief, this is just kind of a guesstimate to a placeholder for the training, but the expectation is there will be training. They have to find the dollars for that.
Right.
Correct, Andre. I think that was just trying to give us some guidelines, but I don't think money should be, I mean, money's always an issue, but I think the quality of the training is the most important thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do we have to put a money thing at all?
No. We could even just do this. Still captures the intent and that it be, and the recommendation that it be funded, right?
I think that I get the reasoning behind that. And I think we certainly don't want to undercut the people who will eventually do the trainings. And I don't know, I guess I just wonder if maybe there's more of a risk for them to be undercut without those suggested dollars than with the suggested dollars in there. Because like with them being in there, like, you know, Dante made a point that maybe that's not enough, but like at least we know that maybe that's not enough.
All right, good. So is everyone good with this modification? It still captures the desire for a scope where these can be small groups and they can be intimate sessions to allow for dialogue, and that they're a high frequency of these trainings. The dollar amounts can be determined later, and that's not within our responsibility. Good.
So commissioners, then any opposition to the phrasing of this particular recommendation for training during the academy? Hearing no opposition, we have consensus on the approval of your number 3.
All right. All right. Good job. Let's keep it going. Keep this energy rolling here. All right. Number 4, co-response mental health. This was presented last time. We did not get into it. As we just heard from Larry and heard last week on the listening session, mental health is top of mind of a lot of people. And so I don't know that I need to go over much of this. So I'll just ask for any questions, comments. You need an overview?
I don't know what you're asking, Josh.
Can we adopt this recommendation? Do you want me to review it? Yes, I'm making an assumption that we, you know,
I mean, what I'm reading, I thought Salt Lake PD already has this, so I'm a little confused of what you're asking.
All right, so what we're asking, yes, you're right. They have the Community Connection Center and SLCPD have a CIT co-response, right? So what our recommendation is to put a focus on, for them to put a focus on one communities of color reach out to those communities and provide community policing in these areas and build trust, understand their needs, and educate them on SLCPD's response and assess if it's accessible to them. So some engagement, right, with those communities. Two, and some of this aligns with the consultant's audit that they just did. So expand the co-response program to provide co-response during hours that are at a higher risk for use of force situations, late afternoon and evening. Provide co-response during virtually all hours and days where mental health crisis calls most frequently occur. So short-term and immediate, 2 officers should be redeployed to afternoon shifts. 1 CIT host officer to each shift should work a staggered schedule that covers Saturday and Sunday. And so it's utilizing resources they have, but to spread them out to cover more time, right? And then 2 clinicians from the Community Connection Center should be redeployed to afternoon shift hours. 1 clinician on each shift should work a staggered schedule that covers Saturday and Sunday. The CIT/host sergeant should vary and stagger hours as needed to provide additional coverage to both sets of assignments. The department should consider offering pay incentives for both officers and clinicians working afternoon shift hours and weekends to be able to consistently fill these assignments. And so that's immediate to provide the co-response model during these other times when they're currently not, that are more prone to responses related to mental health and use of force. Midterm, as staffing permits, build up this program by increasing the number of officers from 4 to 10 to match the number of social workers. Currently, they have 10 social workers, but only 4 officers. So they're not maximizing the potential of this co-response model as much as they could if there were 10 officers and 10 social workers, right? So start building towards that. There are currently 10 social workers and 4 officers, which means only 4 teams are available at a time. This increase in officers would allow for 10 teams. So Jessica, director, agreed with this. I believe the other report audit recommended 4 to 6, but really to maximize what exists there with social workers, 10 and 10 would allow for more deployment in co-response. And then finally, assess and evaluate a civilian EMS response like Denver Star with an outside agency when time is appropriate. Currently, they've got something in development, but our recommendation is to continue to assess and evaluate and work with an outside agency when the time, keep that discussion going, but don't have time, resources right now to develop that all out.
Thank you.
Thank you, Moises, for directing me to being explicit on what we're asking and presenting here. So that is our recommendation.
Thank you, Josh. Just and some of this overlaps with previous.
Did you say something else? Moises? Okay, sorry, Dante.
No, Moises.
No, I was just gonna say I could only see that top paragraph. That's why I couldn't read any of the other part. That's why I was confused.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, just maybe to emphasize, this expands on some level what the training subcommittee put forth, and the mayor's already put into her recommended draft budget in terms of the model itself. Other thoughts or questions, commissioners, on this recommendation?
I like it, especially because this also came from the audit as well. So that's why we've been kind of.
Yes, this is the subcommittee was looking at a co-response model, and you presented, Moises, the different models, right? And so some of like the short term, I believe several of these were from that audit and are in there. I haven't seen their final report. Again, working with the subcommittee and then also Keith and Jessica, this was increased right to 10.
Yeah, commissioners, if I may, your recommendations are exactly where we want to go. So we have the commission's recommendations, the matrix, the audit's recommendations, the mayor's, and Jessica and our team. So really, we're just showing solidarity in exactly what we all want to do and know that it's the right thing to do. So thank you.
Thank you, Jay. Any other thoughts or questions, commissioners? Okay.
One detail, if you scroll up just a little bit, it's about also focusing on those communities of color and building those relationships on how this model will work, so that ideally members of communities of color can feel safer calling law enforcement before issues get to be so much bigger and then are so much harder. I think that's an important detail.
Thank you, Commissioner. You might want to return that new microphone.
I always appreciate your feedback, Dante. Thank you.
Send it back.
All right.
Go ahead, Dante.
I was gonna say, if there's no other questions, commissioners, are there anyone who have heartburn or disagreement or discomfort with any of these recommendations? All right, hearing none, then number 4 has been approved by the commissioners. Thank you, Josh. Keep going.
All right, I'm almost done. Here we go. So I think Commissioner Andrew Weirden was just trying to transition us to this one, which dovetails off the previous recommendation and, understanding the community. So again, with the limited time, resources of the commission, subcommittee, facilitators, it'd be great if we could do a deep dive and assessment and look at different models and create a model. We're not at that phase, but we do make a recommendation that the city can engage in some type of dispute system design process, assessment process to develop the best, most appropriate model system for incoming calls, diversion and dispatch coordination and response. This process should consider and/or include the following: collaboration with public safety to understand how 911 calls are being taken and directed, understanding how communities are being policed and how they want to be policed, engage each of the city's community councils and its communities, add a mental health question to the 911 dispatch script, establish a civilian force response team to handle certain calls for service related to low-level investigative crimes and low-level disputes. And so I think Moises, Commissioner Prospero presented a lot of good information related to some of this. We heard from Matrix. We've heard from others talking to the group about some of these. We just don't have time to develop anything specific, but the subcommittee feels it's valuable the city invest in this assessment and continue development of working towards these better processes and engaging communities and building from the bottom up in, again, their responses and additional policies.
Thoughts, questions, commissioners? I think policies and practices has dazzled them with number 5. So any opposition to the acceptance of number 5? All right, hearing none. We have consensus or unanimity and approval for number 5.
All right, thank you, subcommittee.
That's a lot of words. That's a lot of work. Thank you, commissioners, for all of that. A lot of work went into that, so much appreciated. Why don't we pause very briefly and see if there's any public comment?
Yeah, the only, we don't have any callers, but I did notice, as always, Beverly Hawkins has joined us. And just wanted to check and see whether she had anything she wanted to make as a public comment.
Thank you. Ms. Hawkins?
Sorry, I have nothing to add. I'm just enjoying listening to all these conversations.
Thank you. I appreciate that you're enjoying it. So, thank you for being here. Okay, next up, let's go to.
I think she was just being polite. If that helps. I wasn't sure if my microphone was working, so I wanted to test it.
Got you. Yep.
It's working again.
It is working. It is working. Maybe you should break it. Back to the school safety subcommittee. Siobhan, recommendations to present or just things to consider from the committee?
Yeah, we have something for you to consider. Nicole is going, or Commissioner Salazar Hall, since we're formal in this meeting, is going to present for us.
Okay, can you see my screen share? Yes, yeah. Okay. The one recommendation that we have today that is ready for the larger commission's consideration, what we would request would be approved, is a second extension on the Memorandum of Understanding, or the MOU, between the Salt Lake City Police Department and Salt Lake City School District. It was previously extended, excuse me, to August 2021. We have a new superintendent coming on board. He's starting, I believe, this month. And there is insufficient time for him to be able to settle into the new school district and be able to renegotiate a brand new Memorandum of Understanding. Our hope is that with the extension for another year, this will give us time to add more recommendations that are going to affect the MOU, give us time to work with the school district on some of the data we would like to gather. It will give us additional time to ensure that the changes in the MOU are going to be meaningful, substantial, and aren't just wording adjustments. We want to make this a much better MOU, and the fear is if we don't extend it to August 2022, that it would just be a token change, and we don't want that. We want to have some very meaningful changes. Some of the changes we do want to add are language from Representative Hollins's original bill regarding school resource officers, HB 345, I believe. Not all of the language, but a large majority of the language is what we've been looking at. But we do need more time, of course, to fine tune that and make that into a more formal recommendation for both the city, the SLCPD, and the Salt Lake City School District. Any questions?
I actually have one. This is Ephraim. And it's just about the timeline, and if alternative timelines, like maybe 6 months or so, have been considered or are feasible. My only concern, or maybe not my only, but my biggest concern is that I think the longer that the MOU continues, yes, it allows for time to continue evaluating and looking at different things, but it also is a continuation of some of the issues that students are facing with SROs currently. And so I'm just worried about extending the time that students would have to be facing those things.
Absolutely. And Ephraim, I absolutely share your concern on that. And it was a concern that I had when this was brought to my attention. Logistically, it's not going to happen. We're not going to be able to negotiate something within
by August 2021, or even within 6 months. The last MOU, I believe, and please, Commissioner Prospero, please correct me on this, but I believe the last one took about a year, 2 years, was it, to negotiate? So this was not an easy document. Yeah, it took quite a bit of time. So it's not an easy document to get put in place. And some of the changes that we're talking about are major revamps, turning each and every goal into a measurable goal. It would not just be wordsmithing. And at this point, our fear was that if we put a shorter timeline in place, it would devolve into just wordsmithing. And that's not what we want to have happen, really. We want to make sure that some of these major things are going to happen. Plus, the new FTE, who would be liaison between the school district, PD, and the city, would be coming on board and would be able to assist in some of those negotiations. We want that. We need to get that person hired. We don't have that person hired yet. And we would want that person very heavily involved in those negotiations and making sure that, things like not just the data gathering, but maybe even issues like how the officers are dressed in the school. I know that's something that we've discussed in our subcommittee. Things like that can be put into the MOU, and whether they belong in the MOU, I don't know, but it's something that can possibly be negotiated. But we want to make sure this is done right. And we did not want to put a smaller time frame in there and then end up, I guess, keeping us from getting to where we really want to be.
I wonder if there's something we could add, though, to address what you're saying, is to say, like, not that negotiations will start in August 22, but that, to say that this will be under negotiation and complete in August 20, so something to suggest that we don't just pick up the pencil in August 2022.
Right. And that's not a bad idea. And my understanding is that's not the school board's understanding, but perhaps we should make that more clear. In my discussions with school board members, the superintendent's ready to get onto this. He's very much invested in equity and diversity, and SROs are right up there on one of those issues with school to prison pipeline, that he's very, very much concerned with the school to prison pipeline. So my understanding is this is one of his priorities, but perhaps it would be best to make that very clear of what we're expecting, that discussions would commence, negotiations would commence immediately, or within 3 months, or something to that effect, so that we're not picking up the pencil in August 2022. Because I agree, that's a bit too much. And
the stakeholders in this situation are the students who are actively in these schools. And so as much as it's easy for us to push the pencil, quote unquote, per se, the stakeholders are currently being and actively being affected by these issues. So as much as we can justify putting it to a side burner, the Youth Subcommittee would like to say we vote no on this resolution. We don't think it meets the standards of school safety, especially for marginalized communities and youth. And nothing's been changed adequately since the last MOU. So to push the envelope to justify saying, well, we need to wait till next year, it's not adequate. And we, the youth, want to make it clear that we're not happy with this decision at all.
Okay, and I do need to make it clear, we're not waiting till next year to renegotiate this. This is just extending it so that we can start renegotiations, because right now with the MOU expiring in August 2021, there would be no Salt Lake City PD in any of the schools, or there would be no funding for them. And
students might not be getting arrested in schools for nonviolent offenses and entering the criminal justice system for a whole another year. So
one fear though of that,
the envelope needs to be extremely high, because the Youth Subcommittee, which is its own committee, is very against this policy. And we have 3 voting members on this.
Understood. I completely understand. One of the issues we're facing, and I know Dati has a comment, but one issue that we are facing is that no MOU between SLCPD could open the door to a contract with a private contractor for security. And then we have no control over that.
West High School has its own security, and in my experience, are more capable of handling situations with students than any Salt Lake City Police Department officer can. They have limited options as law enforcement personnel and civilian personnel are able to do completely different things. And there's a different thing with mandated reporting within that structure.
And see,
So to be
we're not
fair,
really,
like within a legal perspective, like there are different situations, and we're not talking about just like negotiating contracts here. Again, stakeholders are being affected, and that's obviously not here and like a priority. As much as I want to give time to a new superintendent, the superintendent, I hope, is ready to implement these things by this fall, because we're going into a new school year. So we shouldn't need to negotiate 3 months during the summer over simple changes as such as thoroughly reviewing the model, the MOU. That should be a priority. That's school safety. And if safety is not a priority for the school district, then that should be a concern of the mayor's office, because the stakeholders, the students in the situation are concerned. And so we can keep saying, well, we can promise that we'll extenuate a 3-month deal to then talk about it to be instituted and structured to be implemented within August 22. That's not sufficient. That's way too long.
So can I ask a question of the youth subcommittee in general? Are they?
Hey Dante, can you ask Dante? She's been waiting for a while for comments.
I'm sorry. Thank you, Commissioner Lynn.
You're good. I didn't mean to interrupt, but I wanted to ask a clarifying question of Nicole. So it's my impression that if the MOU is extended for 1 year, that we cannot implement any changes to the MOU until that 1 year has expired. Is that correct?
that is not entirely my understanding. No, my understanding is that if a new agreement is reached ahead of that August 2022 deadline, it would be implemented effective immediately. And an MOU is just that. It's there as long as everybody agrees to it. So if we come to an agreement, say in December 2021, and we agree that it be implemented immediately, then it'd be implemented immediately. That just the year gives us that year to work on it and make sure it's done correctly. That's all it is. It's not a guarantee. It's not a hard deadline that we have to wait till August 2022 to have any of these changes implemented. They can be implemented any time that the parties agree.
Okay, well, in that case, then I would support what MJ and Ephraim are saying, because if we choose a shorter timeline, say 3 months or 6 months, we can always re-extend it for a shorter period of time and then reevaluate. My concern is that giving us a year is going to give us more time and probably a slower rate of change. And I understand the concern that we need to make an MOU that's extremely solid, but I do think that we can do that. And if, which I know the new superintendent is as equity driven as he says, then that should be on a shorter timeline. And this would only help put pressure to make sure that students feel that their needs are being listened to, because I know that the school board is already facing pressure from students and their parents not to renew the MOU. So if we do it on a shorter timeline, we're going to be representing students better, since they're the majority constituent of the school district and SRO.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Kuhn, did you have something else?
Good job, Dati.
It was going to be along similar lines, and maybe almost like a clarification of Dati's original question, which I think she was essentially asking, the current MOU that's in place would be in place until the renegotiations are finalized come December of 2022 is what I'm kind of understanding. And so if that is the case, I think that I still stand by what I said. So I think ultimately, like, regardless of if the pen's already, or the pencil's already picked up, or if the pencil's picked up 3 months from now, 6 months from now, ultimately, my concern is just how students' lives will be affected between now and whenever the MOU is finally renegotiated, if it is, that kind of thing, is just how will students fare in the meantime?
Now I get it.
Thank you. So maybe a clarification question. Am I understanding that the Youth Commission is okay with an extension, but just for a much shorter period of time than 1 year? Is that what I'm hearing?
6 months. I think we all stand by 6 months at the bare minimum.
Me at the maximum.
Or the maximum, thank you. It's just that that we have a school year already approaching. And while this is looking at the Salt Lake City School District, we still haven't even addressed the University of Utah, where you also have college students who are being affected by race and racism, and how we just had an African-American police chief get replaced, and we don't know who the new replacement is. So this commission's paid no attention to that per se also. And to also speak on that, there is active conversation about defunding the University of Utah Police Department. So it's not completely inappropriate to be putting pressure and a timeline on what's going on in our public education and K through 12 schools, because as we know, there's active pressure going on right now for them to deny CRT, and for them to also, in other school districts at the state level, decide whether or not kids can even receive Black education or Black history education. So this isn't some big deal. This is a necessity, and having uniformed personnel in schools, regardless of their appearance, is still going to affect people by their actions. So as good as an officer can dress within a school system, I'm more worried about the culture that officer has and the interactions and experiences they're creating with people within that school. And to say that having civilian contractors is dangerous isn't particularly true, because they also aren't allowed to just throw handcuffs on people and take them to jail over nonviolent offenses. So Moises is shaking his head, but legally speaking, that's true. You can do a citizen's arrest. This is no security guard can put their hands on any person unless they're separating them. A police officer is an armed individual in a school that has means of not only executing an individual, but tasing them and providing other means of harm to them. Like a
There are
security guard can't
laws
do that.
allow law enforcement to do certain things. Steve, do you want to bring up some of the laws that changed through youth reform?
Well, before we go into that depth real quick, let me see if there's a fix here, or does it need to go back to the subcommittee? So I guess I would ask the subcommittee, the school safety subcommittee, if it's willing to accept that recommendation or amendment from the youth committee to extend this only for 6 months as opposed to a year, or does it need to go back for further discussion?
For to our members.
I think I'd be okay with 6 months. The only concern that if we don't get it done in 6 months and there's no MOU, then lack of guidance may happen, but we can always try to extend it again if it doesn't happen in 6 months.
Could I just ask real quickly? I guess my perception is that the school safety subcommittee wants to see this renegotiated as soon as possible, and that the August 2022 was almost just a safety valve to say it might take a while, and these things are generally for a year, and so if we have to put a date on it, we'll put a date on it. But it sounds like what you're actually recommending, and again, I could be totally wrong, but it sounds like what you're actually recommending is go renegotiate this as soon as you possibly can.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's exactly what
So-
we're looking. We want to get started on this immediately. I know that our subcommittee is working our hardest to get in with the superintendent right away to start bringing these issues to his attention. And we're working on, we have a whole host of other recommendations that we want to go into this new MOU, and we want them to be very, very high on the priority list. I absolutely agree that school safety is and should be on the superintendent's list. That should be
Right.
first and foremost. I don't disagree with any of the youth subcommittee members, and I would encourage the youth subcommittee members to attend our subcommittee so we can have these discussions in the subcommittee itself. And I would encourage the Commissioner Powell, Commissioner Coombe, Commissioner Ullman, come with us when we actually attend our Zoom meetings or WebEx meetings when we do meet with the superintendent, when we get that arranged. So that these issues can be brought up with him specifically. But no, we're not looking to start negotiating in August 2022. We are looking to negotiate immediately.
Yeah.
Absolutely immediately.
This reminds me a little bit of when I was in journalism and I would write the article and the headline would be written by someone else. And so the headline didn't necessarily convey what the article was trying to say. And in this case, what I mean is, I think that really what this is about is getting the MOU on school resource officers renegotiated with all deliberate speed. And the notion of allowing it to continue without being unduly expiring is just kind of the legality of it, the need to ensure continuity of service so that there isn't some abrupt change to what students and parents and teachers and SROs are used to experiencing. But I think that the school safety subcommittee is bearing the lead, if I can put it that way, that the lead is, let's get this renegotiated as quickly as possible, with the subtext of just keep it going until you can get that done, but do it as quickly as you can. And I don't mean to speak so cavalierly. I'm just trying to kind of cut through what I think are some of the hangups here. And I see Commissioner Coombe.
And perhaps what we needs to be added, and I'm sorry, Commissioner Coombe, but perhaps what needs to be added is that we need to include renegotiated immediately, but extended to August 2022.
Commissioner Coombe?
I think maybe to kind of clear things up, we very much believe that this is a priority. I don't think the recommendation would have been written if this wasn't a priority for so many of us in this commission and really in the district itself. I think that a lot of the inspiration and motivation for our recommended amendment of 6 months is that same belief that, we do believe that this is important to a lot of people. And so it seems that for that reason, expedition should be feasible. And then of course, the other motivation is just that I think our number one priority is just that the current issues with the current model and how they affect students, the main constituency, those are the things that we want to mitigate. And so I would love for it to say, renegotiated immediately. But I think we would still feel a lot more comfortable with an expedited timeline, if that might clear things up.
Thank you, Commissioner. If I can also maybe add my 2 cents. One, I think adding some sense of in the language about the urgency and the expectation of that urgency would be helpful. And I also think that a 6-month extension would reflect that expectation of urgency. That's just my thought. As you could also then add an extension from that 6 months if necessary. But I think shorter time frame reflects the expectation of urgency in the negotiation process. But just my 2 cents. So back to the subcommittee, your desire would be to do what? Take it back to the subcommittee for some version of a rewrite, or what are your thoughts?
I think we can take it back to the subcommittee for a rewrite. I mean, my concern is I also know that this is being brought up at the school district level, and so we want to make sure we're staying in lockstep with other wheels that are in motion. So I'll defer to my subcommittee members if they have a different opinion, but it does seem like there's enough conversation desired around this topic that we might not have enough time to resolve it sufficiently here in the full commission meeting. Thoughts? Anybody else? Or does that feel, or do we want to just go ahead with the 6 months and just ask for a vote?
I do see Commissioner Ullman's hand.
Yeah, I was just going to clarify what you said, Siobhan. So technically, this was on the school board agenda on Tuesday, but then they tabled the discussion to June 15th, and the MOU, it's my belief that it expires July 1st. So we do have a really short time range. So I think it's up. I would defer to my other youth subcommittee members on what they would like to move forward with, but that's the timeline that we're working with.
And I guess if I could add, I mean, I think I would prefer an amendment in meeting. I did see some heads shaking to that. I mean, I'm in the policies and practices subcommittee. I can't attend all of the subcommittees, unfortunately, but so I do understand if it would make more sense for this to be deferred to that subcommittee. I think as long as the outcome is an expedited timeline written into the recommendation, I'll certainly feel a bit more at peace. But yeah, I think my preference would be amended in this meeting, but I understand if it would make more sense for those discussions to take place in the next school safety subcommittee meeting.
I second Commissioner Coombs' statement.
So if we do not vote on this now, it's not going to be relevant for the school district because it is tabled for them to discuss on June 15th. So it'll be, even if we take it back to subcommittee and we come back with recommendation, it'll be too late. So really,
we need to vote on it now.
Yeah, we need to act now. That's the downside.
Ultimately, since our commission is giving them a recommendation, and I'm a representative of my constituency and the stakeholders in that, I have to vote no still. That way they have the added pressure of realizing that we're not satisfied with the current 1-year extension, and that we do want negotiations to take place. And sometimes you have to have a statement like no to get that across.
Well, and I think what we're suggesting, MJ, or Commissioner Powell, that we would amend it right now to say 6 months and negotiating with the intent to begin negotiations as soon as possible, correct? Not as it's on the screen.
Not as written.
Yeah. Not how it's written right now. Is that correct? Is that what we're saying?
I thought it was a year, but commence negotiations immediately is what I thought we were discussing. So it wouldn't be August 2022, it'd be July 2022, and it'd be commence negotiations immediately.
Yeah.
So just from a process standpoint, Commissioner Salazar Hall, I mean, I think you have to make you sort of have to make a strategic decision here. I mean, certainly you could put this to a vote of this commission. And a vote could be taken and there could just be more yes votes than no votes, and that's the way it moves forward. On the other hand, you could accept an amendment which it sounds like would enable the youth subcommittee to live with the overall recommendation and then be able to report out consensus rather than a split vote.
And I'll say this, I mean, we've never taken a roll call vote. Our method of making decisions has been by consensus. And so if the youth on this commission would not approve this as it's written, we wouldn't move forward with it based on that model of consensus. So I'm suggesting that it's, as been discussed, the language of immediacy as well as the extension for 6 months is what I hear the youth subcommission is willing to make their friendly amendment to this document.
Yes.
Exactly, Dante.
Okay. So that would be then school safety subcommittee. Are you willing to accept that friendly amendment and adjust the language to achieve consensus?
I would not feel comfortable moving forward without the support of the Youth Commission on this recommendation, and I would support amending it to 6 months.
Thank you, Commissioner Eldridge. Other thoughts, commissioners?
Nicole, does that work with you?
I think 6 months is far too short. Knowing how I know negotiations work, I've done enough of negotiations in my time to know that 6 months for something of this magnitude is not logistically possible.
I fully agree with that, and especially when we start doing the legal piece, when it has to go back to PD and then back to the school district, back to BD, back to the. I mean, I've been there, but that's the practical piece. I think what they're saying to kind of give the message that, hey, we're trying to hurry this up, and if we're at month 5, we'll just say, hey, you need to extend it 6 more months or something like that. Would you be cool with that? To at least provide the essence that we are in a hurry, even though we put the immediate word there, we could still extend it. Yeah, at a practical level, it's going to be really hard, but.
The only way I would feel comfortable with it is if there's explicit language that at the end of 6 months or at the end of 4 months, if there is no progress or there is progress being made, but more time is needed, that an additional 6 month time frame would be added in, just we don't have to come back and do this all over again. That would be the only way I'd feel comfortable, so that the ultimate extension altogether, the hard deadline of having something renegotiated would be July 2022. And I must say that when we developed this recommendation is the 1 year was the hard deadline for when it would have to be done. That was my feeling on it. So it wasn't that we start drafting July 2022. It was no, it'd be done by then, if not sooner.
Yeah, and we discussed that in the meeting. So
yeah, so it'd be helpful to have people come to the meetings and discuss that with us ahead of time.
Yeah.
So if I can restate, Commissioner Salazar-Hall, is that you would be willing to modify the document, accept a modification of the document to a 6 month extension, providing there was language that said, if after 4 months, success does not look practical, there will be an extension once again of another 6 months. Am I paraphrasing correctly?
Yeah, and I'm not quite sure how to word that so that it's lock solid, because I don't want to have to come back again to this and then be faced with commissioners stating we want it 2 months now. We only want to extend 2 months. We only want to extend it 1 month. We only want to extend 4 months.
I just want to, I hope that this comes off in the way that I intended. This body is making recommendations as opposed to policy. And so I think it's up to the policymakers to determine what is feasible and reasonable as it relates to the timing of the negotiation. But it seems to me like, again, all of the school safety subcommittee members want this agreement to be renegotiated as quickly as is feasible. And members of the youth subcommittee want that to be conveyed to be a goal of 6 months. And so what I hear Commissioner Salazar-Hall saying is simply keep the MOU in place until it is fully renegotiated.
Right. We don't want it lapsing. The last thing you ever want is for something to lapse.
And I just want to see with Commissioners Coombe, Powell, and Uman if they agree with that. In other words, that yes, the goal will be to renegotiate it with all deliberate speed and get it done in 6 months. And if it takes additional time based on the different players who need to be part of the negotiation, that you're supportive of the current MOU not lapsing, but staying in place until that new one is renegotiated.
I think I would, in a way, have to say yes. I think it's important that the immediacy is conveyed and the urgency is conveyed. I think it's also important that the urgency is conveyed by way of explicit mention of that 6 month time period. And I do also think that having language in there that expresses that if needs be, there can be another extension. I think maybe the only, I guess, language reservation I have is just the explicit mention of an additional 6 months. Maybe if it were to just say, if, you know, if needs be, there can be an extension as opposed to.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking, Commissioner Coom, with an extension of the current MOU remaining in place, you know, for the next 6 months or until renegotiation or something like that, so that you're not artificially giving an additional 6 months to the current MOU, but you're suggesting, hey, we're shooting for 6 months. If we don't get there, we're gonna have to keep working until we do, and in the meantime, keep the existing MOU.
I think that's a really great, I think, kind of summation of everything, and in a way that protects a lot of concerns at the same time.
How does this language look that I just added in?
I personally think that this is a good conveyance of the urgency.
I guess I'm confused about this. The first sentence says you're extending the expiration date for a year.
Oh.
I just, in SLCD, we'll just delete that.
Okay.
That's why he gets paid $1 million contract.
Yeah, from your lips to God's ears. Okay.
Maybe you can
other
find
commissioners, Commissioner Uman, Commissioner Powell. Does that work for you?
Sorry, I'm just thinking about it. 1 second.
Okay.
Were you gonna say something, Steve?
I was gonna ask Dante if he would use some of that money to buy me a new microphone.
I'll get on that.
I'm with Larry. What I'm hearing is we need to renegotiate this thing. It's in place so that we have something in place, because I think that's important to have. And just to send a message that it's important to this commission to do it as soon as possible are all things that I can easily agree with. And I think if we can work out that language, I think it would be good to pass it in this session, so that the school board has at least what our position is represented in that conversation. I think there's a lot of stakeholders on this, and I think we should be one of them. Let's have a discussion about a new MOU, and let's do it as soon as possible. And I kind of think that's what we're talking about.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, and then in that case, then I would also support the new language.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Powell.
I follow Dati and Ephraim's lead. I don't think I need to substantiate any further how much of a necessity it is that this gets addressed immediately.
Thank you. Commissioner Gilman. Okay, well, first I just want to say thank you to the youth commissioners for your voice. I recognize you can't be at all meetings while you're trying to attend some and can't attend others. But this, I think, conversation is important. Your voice is important. The reflections that you speak for your colleagues and community are important. School Safety Subcommittee, I appreciate the hard work to get this to where it is and in place at this point, and appreciate your willingness to take those friendly amendments, even if they maybe don't seem too friendly. But I think they're all offered in the expectation of getting this done in the best way for the students, certainly. And so I appreciate that. Any further questions or comments on this before we see if we can reach a consensus? All right, hearing no questions, Is there anyone in opposition to the draft? Well, it's not the draft, the way that this is currently written now on the extension of the MOU on school resource officers. Is there any opposition to this as written? All right, hearing no opposition, this committee recommendation has been approved. Thank you, everyone.
With that, Dante, I just want to invite to extend the same thought that you were just sharing. If there is an opportunity to talk to the school district and the school board on their meeting on the 15th, if we could have a representative of the youth subcommittee come to our next meeting so that we can collaborate on how we want to talk about this with the school district, I would love to have that shared conversation so we can make sure we're all working from the same sheet of music as we go forward.
I agree.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you. Was there another recommendation from the school safety subcommittee that you wish to share? Okay. Recognizing the time that it's 7, the training subcommittee didn't have anything prepared for a vote. We were just going to provide you some draft language for consideration, and then we would go back and complete the kind of final drafting of the language. I would suggest I'm not going to hold you for that. So just in terms of kind of next steps, the next meeting on the 9th will be a subcommittee meeting. All the subcommittees will meet once again on the 9th. The 16th, after discussions with the core commissioners and with the staff, the 16th will be the final commission meeting in this iteration of the full commission meeting. We will then bring back any and all recommendations for final approval by the commission. And we will use the following 2 weeks to be in preparation of the phase 1 kind of draft report that will go to city council and to the mayor. And we're calling it phase 1 because staff and everyone has been very clear that this is not the end of this commission, that this is just the first phase of that, and the iterations moving forward as recommendations have come from the commission are still under consideration and evaluation about how often, when, all of those things. But this is phase 1. And so the 16th will be the final opportunity for us to meet as a whole, and we'll do whatever version of appreciation, celebration. Moises said he would buy everyone t-shirts. And so we'll come together that last time to do whatever kind of cleanup work needs to be done. We will then have the facilitators will have their draft ready back to you just for your review. And then it will be presented, or at least ready, hopefully, to present to council and to the mayor by the last day of this month. And so that's kind of the moving forward steps. Did I misstate anything, Siobhan or Larry? I don't know if Josh is still on here.
I would just say that the type of feedback we'll be looking for on that is we just want to make sure that we are not mischaracterizing anything
right.
differently. So that's not that you have to, we'll get somebody to copy, edit it, et cetera. Just that type of, that you're okay with the tone and that we're representing things in the way that you want to be represented as a commission.
Right, right. Josh?
Dante, I just add, and I put in the chat, just to clarify, our policies and practices subcommittees on Thursday, the 10th.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. And I don't want to not offer the opportunity for additional or final thoughts on what we were talking about earlier that we paused for a moment, which is the idea and the conversation around critical race theory and the importance of, I would suggest, each and every one of you knowing what that is, doing some version of your own work on understanding what CRT is so that you can counter the absolute misstatements and factual inaccuracies as it is often presented. And that this work is not CRT necessarily. Evaluating outcomes based on race, on some level is CRT. That's the essence of CRT. But that's really not what we're doing in terms of evaluating. We're looking from the front end, how can we improve culture, climate, policies, practices, training, et cetera, of the police department for Salt Lake City, with the hopes of improvement in outcomes just across all identities and everyone who is a resident of Salt Lake City.
Dante, may I ask a question?
Yes, sir.
Does critical race theory umbrella multi-generational racial trauma?
In essence, yes, because it is taking all of that into consideration by identifying the issues that have impacted communities of color across generations and across all
scopes of life and everything.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. So just thoughts on that. Commissioner Johnson, I know in education and others of you are in education, so just offer your opportunity for any thoughts on this to help us move forward.
Hey, Dante, what are these small groups that you're talking about?
I'm not sure I follow.
This after the 19th, we'll have like little small subgroups. Or am I confused?
Maybe the 16th is the final meeting, and then the Langdon group and us will meet to complete the draft phase 1 report. And then that'll be just sent back to either the core commissioners or all of you, just so you can take a look and make sure that there's nothing completely misstated in the document. But then we'll finish it and submit it to mayor and council on the 30th. But that's the last component of this iteration of what we're doing.
The only thing I might add, Dante, is that I am hosting a couple of small group listening sessions here in the next few weeks. So that might be what Commissioner Hawkins is referring to.
Okay,
Yeah.
I misunderstood. Thank you.
Sorry, I didn't know.
Way to jump in, Larry.
Sorry about that.
Okay, yes.
So from my understanding, pretty much this phase is over on June 30th.
Yes.
And nothing after that. We're not.
It's not yet definitively created what that will look like. It will continue. I'll just say that because the staff will get mad at me if I don't. It will continue. Just what it completely looks like in that continuation is still being in discussion.
Okay, thank you.
Whether it's once a month or that kind of thing, how it moves forward. Right.
Okay,
thank you. How it's facilitated, those kinds of things are still the details being worked on.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, any then final thoughts for the good of the order? Okay, great meeting. I would just say excellent meeting. We are here and we have reached a point where we can respectfully challenge each other, offer our thoughts, debate, discuss, and reach consensus after all that happens. And that's what this is all about. Every voice matters. And I want to make sure each and every one of you know every voice matters. And even those who aren't speaking, your voice still matters and it is taken into consideration. So much, much appreciated. Okay. Well, I can't toast anybody necessarily, but I wish you a fabulous rest of your week and stay safe and be healthy. And we will see you again very soon.
Thanks, Dante.
Thank you, Dante.
Peace out, everyone.
Thank you, Dante.
It's all right. Let me end it for you. It'll bump you right out.